The government takeover of the banks, the means of credit and exchange, the car industry, medicine, these are all serious matters. But the government takeover of children and families is by far the most serious. Government's assumption of power over families is the most destructive practice of government today, and yet we hear very little about it. The divorce regime is a threat not only to social order, but also to civic freedom. I think it is the greatest threat to freedom, to both the destruction of families and to the constitutional protection today. Media discussions about same-sex marriage and fatherless children barely scratch the surface of how the government is destroying families and the Constitution. What is happening today is much more serious than simply unfairness or gender bias against fathers in custody proceedings. What we are seeing is a government machinery that is destroying the principal check on its power, which is the family. The most basic human rights and constitutional protections are routinely violated in America's family courts. The lives of children and parents are in serious danger once they are, as the phrase goes, taken into custody. Today in America, citizens who are legally unimpeachable, citizens who are sitting in their own homes minding their own business, citizens who are under no suspicion of any legal infraction or transgression, can be forcibly summoned to secret courts and find themselves stripped of their children and incarcerated without trial. Americans today are subject to incarceration and other criminal penalties, not for recognized crimes, but for how they conduct their private lives, including how they raise their children. Without demonstrating you've committed any legal infraction, government officials can now enter your home, examine your private papers and effects, empty your bank account, remove you from your home, jail you without trial, and most serious of all, take away your children. The police-state methods used by the divorce industry are not a future possibility. They are the present reality. The family courts and the vast federally funded social service bureaucracies are the most predatory and repressive sector of government ever created in the United States. I want to give you a list. I want to read you a list here of the practices that are now widespread in what was once the freest society on earth. Mass incarcerations without charge or trial. Forced confessions. Innocent people forced to confess to crimes they have not committed. Children forcibly separated from parents under no suspicion of wrongdoing, and the parents stripped of their children without explanation. Government agents entering the homes, examining the papers and effects, and seizing the property of citizens under no suspicion of any infraction. Court records, including hearing tapes and transcripts, are doctored and falsified with the knowledge of court officials, and evidence is fabricated against the innocent. Defendants are denied the constitutional right to face their accusers. Bureaucratic police are authorized to issue subpoenas and arrest warrants against parents with no hearing. Special political courts are created specifically to convict parents of political crimes. Forced labor facilities are constructed specifically for parents. Children are instructed to hate their parents with the backing of government officials. Children are forced by government officials to act as informants against their parents. Children are abused and even killed with the backing of government officials. Knowingly false accusations, for which no evidence is presented, are accepted as fact without proof, overturning, obviously reversing the presumption of innocence, and they are not punished. Parents are ordered by government officials to separate from their spouses on pain of losing their children. Parents are forced to pay the private fees of court officials whom they have not hired and whose services they have not sought or used on pain of incarceration. Parents suspected of no wrongdoing are punitively stripped of their property and income, and they are reduced to penury. Government officials use the mass media to vilify private American citizens, and political leaders use their offices as platforms to verbally attack private American citizens who have no right of reply or to speak on their own behalf. And there's more. Crooked and rapacious courts are nothing new, even in free societies. But I think something more than simply crooked courts is operating here. The divorce regime today is driven by an extremist ideology and by bureaucratic expansion, comparable to the ideological and bureaucratic dictatorships of the last century. In those systems, what began as an ideological drive for equality or liberty or socialism or some other high-minded ideal eventually degenerated into what was little better than what we in political science refer to as a kleptocracy, or government by thieves. The Communist Party of the Soviet Union, of course, was more than a tyranny. It was a system in the end that degenerated into a system of organized criminality, where everyone was systematically on the take. Today's divorce industry advertises itself also with high-minded ideals: the best interest of the child, the welfare of children, women's equality, the need to protect children from evil fathers. And yet, likewise, it is no exaggeration to say that the system of family law today has degenerated to the point where it is little more and nothing less than a system of organized crime. We have now reached the stage where the lawbreakers run the criminal justice system and pass sentence on law-abiding citizens, where the criminals sit on the bench and the law-abiding citizens sit in the docket. Throughout this country, in virtually every jurisdiction, American citizens have been subject to what is little less than a reign of terror, a terror that uses children as weapons against their parents. This terror is administered, as it was in the French Revolution, under fascism and under communism, by a system of specialized, effectively secret courts, and by a bureaucratic apparatus. The divorce regime is the most totalitarian, and I don't use that word lightly, but it is the most totalitarian institution that has ever to arise in the United States. Its operatives recognize no private sphere of life. Judge Robert Page of New Jersey has said that the power of family court judges is almost unlimited. What would you do if someone took away your children? What would you be expected to do? What is the predictable response of any parent if someone interferes with their children or comes between them and their children? Would you stand there jabbering that you were a good parent? Would you start assembling evidence to prove to the abductors that that they should not take away your children, and that you had a right to keep them? Would you enroll in classes to show the abductors that you are trying to become a better parent? Or would you demand the immediate return of your children? Would you use any means at your disposal to recover your children and to protect your children? Yet this is precisely what we expect parents to do in this country. No parent is going to agree to the confiscation of his children. No parent should agree to the confiscation of his children. To expect parents to accept the stealing and government kidnapping of their children is to pervert our entire system of criminal justice, to destroy our system of constitutional government, and to invite serious trouble. Never before in human history has any government created a machinery whose primary purpose is to take children away from their parents. The Nazis did it, the communists did it, but even for them it was not their primary purpose. In America today we have created a multi-billion-dollar government machine that exists for no other purpose. The abrogation of parental rights is much further advanced than most people, even most conservatives and family advocates, realize. Most Americans discover the truth about judicial kidnapping only when they come home one day and find that their children are gone. Shortly afterwards, there comes a knock on the door. Whether it is homeschoolers, parents accused under trumped-up child abuse charges, or divorced fathers, state functionaries now have so many ways to take both children and parents into custody that we now have a virtual gulag for the incarceration of family members. Today it is a cliche that the family is the building block